It was the summer of 1997 when the Harris family, Daniel, his wife Martha and their children, Emily and Josh, decided to escape city life for a peaceful weekend at Lake Echo. Daniel Harris wasn't just any man, he was a highly respected U.S. Army veteran, known in his neighborhood for discipline, strength, and his unwavering love for his family. After serving 2 tours overseas, he longed for quiet moments away from the noise of the world. To him, this lake trip was not just a vacation, it was a chance to finally give his children the kind of carefree childhood memories he never had. Neighbors remembered the sight vividly. On that Saturday morning, the family packed their old station wagon with fishing gear, picnic baskets, and blankets. Emily clutched her favorite stuffed bear, refusing to leave it behind, while Josh bounced with excitement, begging his father to let him steer the boat later. Martha, always the organized one, double-checked everything: sunscreen, sandwiches, extra clothes. To anyone watching, they seemed like the perfect American family, full of laughter and love, preparing for a weekend of fun. When they arrived at Lake Echo, the sun was shining brightly over the calm water, reflecting the tall pine trees that surrounded its edges like silent sentinels. The lake was eerily quiet, with only the faint call of birds in the distance. Daniel secured the family's small motorboat and helped his children climb aboard. The air smelled of pine and fresh water, and the only sound was the gentle ripple of waves against the hull. It was serene, almost too serene. As the family drifted farther from shore, they laughed, sang songs, and waved back at a few locals who watched from the docks. Witnesses recalled the sight of Daniel standing tall at the edge of the boat, his arm around Martha's shoulder, the children playfully splashing water. It was a picture-perfect moment, something you'd expect to see on the cover of a family magazine. But what no one could have known then was that this idyllic scene would soon become the last living memory anyone had of them. By evening, the Harris family was spotted one final time near the center of Lake Echo. Locals saw their boat drifting slowly toward the western shore, the children's voices echoing faintly across the water. Then, the sun dipped below the horizon, and the lake swallowed them into its vast, dark silence. Hours later, when the boat returned without them, the nightmare began. Early the next morning, just as the mist began to roll across Lake Echo, a pair of local fishermen noticed something strange on the water. About 50 yards from the shore, Daniel Harris's motorboat floated silently, rocking with the rhythm of the gentle waves. At first, they assumed the family was still asleep on board, but as they drew closer, they realized something was terribly wrong. The boat was empty. There was no movement, no voices, no sign of life. Just the eerie sound of water slapping against the hull. The fishermen carefully approached, calling out Daniel's name. No one answered. When they tied their line to the drifting boat and climbed aboard, the sight they found chilled them. The family's belongings were still there. A wicker picnic basket sat half open, filled with sandwiches that had been only half eaten. A thermos of coffee was still warm, suggesting the family had been there not long before. But what stood out most was the life jackets, neatly folded on the seats, untouched, as if no one had planned to leave the boat. The men reported their discovery to authorities, and within hours, Lake Echo was swarming with search teams, divers, and local police. The shoreline was combed carefully, helicopters circled overhead, and boats zigzagged across the water. Every inch of the lake was scanned, but there was no trace of Daniel, Martha, Emily, or Josh. It was as though they had simply vanished into thin air. Not a splash, not a scream, not a clue. The only thing left behind was their silent, drifting boat. Investigators quickly noted several odd details. The boat's engine was turned off, yet the key was still in the ignition. The anchor was missing, as though it had been deliberately removed, but there was no rope trailing in the water. Even stranger, the children's fishing rods were still propped up, one with a fresh line cast into the lake, bobbing slightly as if waiting for a bite. It looked less like a family outing that ended in tragedy, and more like a scene frozen in time, interrupted mid-moment by something unnatural. Word of the disappearance spread quickly through the small lakeside community. Some whispered about an accident, others suspected foul play, but nothing explained why an entire family could vanish without leaving a single clue behind. The abandoned boat became a chilling symbol of the mystery, a ghostly reminder of a family that had gone out for a simple day of fun and never came back. Weeks after the Harris family's disappearance, investigators searching their lakeside cabin stumbled across something they hadn't expected. Daniel Harris's personal leather-bound journal. It was tucked inside the drawer of a nightstand, neatly placed, almost as if Daniel wanted someone to find it. At first glance, the entries seemed ordinary notes about his children, mentions of fishing trips, and reflections on adjusting to civilian life after years of military service. But as detectives flipped through the later pages, the tone shifted. growing darker, more frantic, almost paranoid. Daniel had written about strange disturbances he claimed to notice during their stays at Lake Echo. He described faint lights flickering on the water in the middle of the night, too steady to be reflections, too deliberate to be fireflies. He mentioned hearing distant voices, like whispers carried by the wind, though no one was there. In one entry, he wrote about waking up at exactly 30:15 a.m., every night without fail, to the sound of footsteps just outside the cabin door. Yet when he opened it, the porch was always empty. The final entry was what unsettled investigators the most. The handwriting was rushed, uneven, as if written in a state of panic. If what I saw last night was real, then Lake Echo hides more than water. I need to know the truth before it's too late. Beneath the words was a shaky sketch. A rough outline of the lake, with an X, drawn deep in the center, right where the water was said to be at its darkest and deepest. No one knew what he meant, but it suggested that Daniel had discovered something he was too afraid to speak about openly. Detectives debated whether these journal entries were the result of lingering war trauma. Daniel had served in conflict zones overseas, and some believed he might have been suffering from post-traumatic stress that made him imagine threats where none existed. But others weren't so sure. The journal didn't read like the ramblings of a broken man. It read like a warning, a desperate attempt to record something he couldn't tell anyone else. And if Daniel was right, then maybe the family's disappearance wasn't an accident at all. The discovery of the journal changed everything about the investigation. It wasn't just a missing persons case anymore. It was now tied to something larger, something hidden beneath the surface of Lake Echo. The haunting question investigators couldn't shake was this: what did Daniel Harris see that night? Long before the Harris family ever arrived, Lake Echo had carried a dark reputation. Locals whispered about it in hushed tones, warning children never to wander too close to the water after sunset. Fishermen told stories of strange shadows gliding beneath the surface, moving against the current, vanishing when boats tried to follow. Some families who had lived near the lake for generations even believed the place was cursed, pointing to the number of people who had gone missing over the years without explanation. One of the earliest recorded tales dated back to the late 1800s. A group of loggers working near the lake claimed to hear chanting at night, echoing across the water, as if a congregation was gathered on an invisible shore. When they followed the sounds, they found nothing but still water under the moonlight. Days later, one of the men vanished while returning from town, his boots found neatly placed at the edge of the lake. His body never recovered. From that moment, Lake Echo earned its chilling nickname, the Drowning Mirror. In the decades that followed, disappearances around Lake Echo grew into a pattern. Hikers, campers, and even skilled swimmers were said to vanish without a sound. Locals swore that the lake sometimes swallowed people whole, pulling them under in silence, leaving no ripples, no bodies, no answers. Stories of glowing orbs above the water, whispers in the fog, and faces reflected in the lake that weren't your own spread like wildfire in the community. Parents used these legends as cautionary tales, but deep down, many feared there was truth behind them. When investigators reopened the Harris case, older residents were quick to point out these stories. Some insisted Daniel must have stumbled onto something connected to the lake's past. Something that others had seen but never survived to tell. A few even claimed to have seen the Harris family's boat late that evening, drifting near the same stretch of water marked in Daniel's journal. To them, it was proof that the veteran had uncovered the secret generations had whispered about. Yet, despite the legends, nothing concrete was ever found. No evidence of rituals, no scientific explanation for the lights, no logical reason for the disappearances. Still, the chilling history of Lake Echo loomed over the case like a shadow, raising one haunting possibility. Maybe Daniel Harris hadn't imagined those voices or lights at all. Maybe he had finally discovered the truth behind the legend that had been waiting beneath the surface for centuries. For more than 2 decades, the Harris disappearance remained nothing more than a cold case file collecting dust in a federal archive. Then, in 2023, a specialized FBI unit focused on unsolved missing persons cases decided to reopen the mystery of Lake Echo. With new sonar scanning technology and deep water drones at their disposal, investigators believed they could finally explore areas of the lake that had been unreachable back in 1997. The Harris case was chosen not only because of its chilling details, but also because of the strange journal entry, which hinted at something deliberately hidden. The search began quietly. Agents arrived at Lake Echo under the guise of a standard survey, but locals immediately noticed the heavy equipment, unmarked trucks, and armed security posted near the shoreline. FBI divers in black wetsuits slipped beneath the surface while drones hovered above, mapping the lake in grids. Within days, anomalies began to appear on sonar, large, unnatural shapes resting deep beneath the murky water. At first, they were dismissed as boulders or fallen trees, but their sharp outlines suggested something man-made. While the sonar team worked the depths, another discovery reignited the case in a different direction. On the far western edge of the lake, tangled in weeds and reeds, searchers found the Harris family's abandoned motorboat, still remarkably intact after 26 years. Its paint was faded, its hull scarred by time, but it was unmistakably theirs. The boat should have sunk long ago, yet somehow it had resurfaced, as if deliberately returned to be found. Investigators carefully towed it back to shore, treating it as a potential crime scene frozen in time. Inside, the boat looked eerily untouched, like a preserved snapshot of the past. Dust and mold clung to the seats, but beneath the layers, the same objects remained: fishing rods, a child's backpack, even Martha's sunglasses folded neatly near the steering console. Every item was catalogued, photographed, and tested, but one detail immediately drew suspicion: the floorboards. They looked slightly uneven, as if something had been pried open and then forced shut again. That small imperfection would soon lead to a discovery that stunned everyone on the team. News of the FBI's presence spread quickly through the community. Crowds gathered at the shoreline, whispering about the Harris family, about ghosts, about curses. For locals, the return of the boat after so many years was not just evidence, it was an omen. Something about Lake Echo had waited all this time, and now, for reasons no one could explain, it seemed the lake was ready to reveal one of its secrets. When FBI forensics teams pried up the warped floorboards of the Harris family's recovered boat, they didn't expect to find anything significant. For years, investigators had assumed the vessel was nothing more than a relic, a piece of the puzzle too weathered by time to hold answers. But as the boards came loose, wedged deep between the ribs of the hull, a rusted metal lockbox emerged. Waterlogged, sealed tight, and strangely heavy, it bore no signs of belonging to the Harris family. Its very presence raised an unsettling question: who had hidden it there, and why? The lockbox was carefully transported to a controlled FBI lab, where experts worked meticulously to force it open. The moment the lid cracked, a foul, metallic odor escaped, an unmistakable scent of dried blood and rust. Inside lay a disturbing collection of objects: several sets of military dog tags, each corroded but still legible, belonging to men who had been reported missing decades earlier. Alongside them was a single child's shoe, stained a deep brownish red, preserved unnaturally as though it had been trapped from the very day it was lost. What startled investigators most, however, was the folded, brittle sheet of paper at the bottom of the box. When carefully unrolled, it revealed a map of Lake Echo, hand-drawn and marked with several X symbols across its waters. Each mark corresponded to specific areas where people had vanished in the past. The paper was faded, smeared with age, and faint spots of blood blurred parts of it, but the intent was clear. Whoever had drawn the map knew the lake's secrets, and had marked the very places where tragedy had struck. The presence of the dog tags tied the case to Daniel Harris in a chilling way. He had served with some of the men whose names appeared on them. Soldiers who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, during and after combat. The FBI began to question whether the Harris family's disappearance was random, or if Daniel himself had discovered a hidden connection between the lake and his former comrades' fates. The blood-stained shoe, clearly belonging to a child, only deepened the horror. It didn't belong to Emily or Josh Harris, so whose child had it once fit? The lockbox's contents left investigators shaken. It was no longer just about one vanished family. It was about a chain of disappearances stretching back decades, tied together by blood, secrecy, and something lurking beneath the waters of Lake Echo. For the first time in years, the FBI realized they weren't simply investigating a cold case. They had stumbled into the heart of something much darker. The lockbox discovery should have provided answers, but instead it unraveled into even deeper mystery. FBI agents pored over every detail, yet nothing explained how the Harris family vanished so completely. No bodies were ever recovered, no personal belongings surfaced beyond what was left in the boat, and no trace of a struggle was found. To the investigators, it was as though the family had simply stepped off the edge of reality and been erased. The objects in the lockbox hinted at something sinister, but offered no explanation as to what force, human or otherwise, was behind it. The soldiers' dog tags suggested that Daniel Harris may have been uncovering a buried truth, perhaps even one tied to his own past. Had he recognized the names before hiding the box? Was he being followed, threatened, or silenced? Or was he trying to warn others about a danger too great to speak aloud? The presence of the child's shoe only amplified the unease. Investigators combed through missing persons reports from the surrounding counties, searching for a match. But the records led to dead ends. It was as though the shoe had come from a ghost, another innocent claimed by the lake. As news of the findings leaked, theories exploded across the media. Some believed Lake Echo was the site of military experiments gone wrong, a dumping ground for secrets the government never wanted revealed. Others clung to the supernatural, insisting the lake was cursed, a place where restless spirits lured the living to join them in the depths. Locals, meanwhile, grew restless. For them, the return of the Harris boat after 26 years wasn't a discovery, it was a warning. Inside the FBI, the case report grew thicker, but answers remained elusive. Every lead circled back to the same chilling absence: no physical trace of the Harris family, no logical explanation for the lockbox, and no clear understanding of what Daniel Harris had seen before he vanished. The case files filled with photographs of the boat, the blood-stained shoe, and the crude map with its ominous X marks. But not one shred of evidence explained the most important question of all: what happened on that lake in 1997. And so, the investigation sat in limbo, caught between fact and legend, truth and fear. Lake Echo remained unchanged, its dark waters hiding whatever secret had taken the Harris family. And as investigators looked out across its still surface, one thought haunted them all: maybe the answer wasn't lost at the bottom of the lake. Maybe it was still out there, waiting, watching, and deciding who it would claim next. To this day, the Harris family's fate remains one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in American history. The lockbox, the blood-stained shoe, the marked map, all of it points to something hidden beneath the surface of Lake Echo. Yet after 26 years, no one can say with certainty what truly happened on that quiet summer evening in 1997. Some believe Daniel Harris uncovered a truth too dangerous to share. Others whisper that Lake Echo itself is alive, a dark mirror that takes what it wants and leaves behind only questions. But whether it was man-myth, or something far worse, one fact remains: the Harris family was swallowed by a mystery that refuses to die. So the next time you stand by a still, silent lake, staring at its black waters stretching endlessly before you, ask yourself one chilling question: if something looked back at you from beneath the surface, would you even know before it was too late?
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.